First of all, before I make my point, I want to say I'm not a fan of Trump.
Okay.
I just want to make that clear before I start.
You don't have to, but I understand why you want to.
Okay. So you're asking why people aren't making up a big fuss about him going back in the White House?
Well, why they don't care?
They don't care, my mate. I'll tell you, because they've got their own problems. Now you're making some very strong points morally, and I agree with you actually. But the point is, right now, he's the best man for the job. I know, I'm not saying he's a good person. I'm not saying he's got a good character or anything like that. Don't get me wrong. But practically, he'll speak to Putin, hopefully sort this business out in Ukraine. And as you say, people are worried about food. They are worried about the price of petrol. They are worried about the bill.
But why? I mean, let's take Putin into it then. You're talking about people who admire the attributes that Putin has. This is what I mean about Western values, sacred and inviolate, I thought, values. And I appreciate, I'm happy to sound naive. I think it's important to sound naive sometimes. We're not supposed to like dictators. I'm not talking about the next election. The election is just one. I'm talking about the knowledge that he tried to steal the last one by encouraging Americans to kill Americans.
Yep.
How can you not care enough about that? I don't care how invested you are in the war in Ukraine. The man that seeks to lead the country encouraged Americans to kill Americans so that he could steal an election.
Right. And I'm not saying at any point he's a good person.
No, I know you're not.
The point is, right, I know you're clever, right, and I like your show, but James, you're not a politician. You're very good on the radio, my old mate. And, you know,
this doesn't mean anything. I'll ask you the question again. Why do people not care about a man who encouraged Americans to kill Americans trying to steal an election from the Americans?
Because he's the best man for the job.
But that doesn't mean anything.
It does, though. It does to them. It might not to you, and I know you're educated and clever. It might not to you.
Keep saying this stuff, because, I mean, it might not to you either, because you've said yourself that you're not a fan of Donald Trump. So you're speculating about a constituency of people that includes some of the richest people in America.
Yeah. So
because he appeals to the poor. You haven't answered my question. He's the best man for the job. Was Hitler the best man for the job?
Well, no, but he was the only man for the job. I mean,
Hitler was the best man for the job, mate. That's what people thought in 1930s Germany.
And they were wrong. But I'm not saying that. And they were wrong, weren't they? And people are probably very. But the problem is, right now, you've got Biden, who, God bless him, isn't competent, is he?
Biden's wasn't even in the election battle. So you are saying the same thing that people would have said in 1930s Germany. You're just not quite ready to admit it yet.
No, you can't compare him to Hitler.
Of course I can. He tried to get Americans to kill Americans to steal an election from Americans. He mounted a violent assault on democracy itself. Who would you compare him to?
Well, I couldn't compare him to Hitler because you've gone too far. Because Hitler was one of the most evil people who's ever lived. He killed, what was it, 6 million Jews?
Not in the 1930s.
With 1939, when the Second World War started.
Compare him to 1936 Hitler. Compare him to 1935. I mean, what is it? You steal elections and you encourage Americans to kill Americans so that you can stay in power after you've been voted out. But he's the best man. He's the best man for the job. In a way, I don't think you're wrong. I'm just struck that you're reluctant to follow your own logic all the way to all the other hideous dictators in the recent past, or even in the distant past, who were considered to be the best man for the job. Did any of them ever turn out to be, Lewis? Can you think of any violent dictators who did turn out to be good for the country that they ran?
Well, no, but you haven't got. The thing is,
okay. No, it's all right. At least you're honest. But everyone thought they were the best men for the job as well. I don't know where the penny drops. I don't know where the scales fall from the eyes.
People don't care because we've been taught not to care through populism. Populism works in a dichotomy. It's extremism. Either side, you're either for or you're against. There is no grey area. So if you're for, you're with it. You're there waving the flag and all the rest of it. If you're against, you can be against for such and such a time. And then it's exhausting. The flood through the media and everything, the flood of fake news, the flood of shit, like Steve Bannon said, you know.
Yeah, I know you're repeating him, but Ofcom aren't very fond of that word, so let's not use it again.
Yeah, well, but they're flooding the zone with excrement, sort of thing, you know. And you can live in flooded zone of excrement, saying that in front of me is a poo going by down the river, you know.
Yeah.
But if you're constantly living in that, it brings you down. So what do? You shut off. You stop listening to the news. You stop. You cannot actually afford to live in that sort of environment anymore. You talked yesterday about mental health. It's bad for your mental health. It's bad for everybody's mental health. So it's not that you're seeing. It's
but
like,
then there's another dimension because you're describing a kind of enforced ambivalence. I'm going to stop caring because caring is killing me. But then there's another gear by which you move from being. I'm just reading about one of the people who died at the January the 6th protests. Died of a heart attack before he even got there. And he used to be a Barack Obama fan. So there's a shift into ambivalence. But for some people, or even for those people, then there's a shift into actual support for the rather fetching images that you just conjured up. This is what I want to see out of my window. I'm loving the fact that I'm up to my ears in excrement. That's the bit I don't think I'll ever get.
Well, yeah, I'm going to write a book about this one day.
Good.
It's usually by people that there's something else lacking in their lives.
I don't know that I'm comfortable with it. I've been doing this line for years, but
I know.
It sounds condescending. It sounds smug.
It does, doesn't it?
Yes.
It doesn't it? And it's not people that are stupid, and it's not people that are brain dead, and it's not people that don't have a life. It's because it's a feeling of community, and this is exactly what I'm talking about with populism.
Yes.
You have it builds a community. Populism builds a community, either for or against matters. It has no time for those in between. That's where you get dictators, like your last caller said. That's where you get dictators, because so many of the populace was for Hitler, because it was this sense of community, this sense of we'll get richer.
We will right historical wrongs, most obviously reparations. We will punish the people who've brought us low, most obviously Jews. And he's the best man for the job, as Lewis.
No, but he also got in because other people couldn't face that. So they just didn't vote. They just kept to themselves. They didn't utter a word. And that's the population that's really quiet at the moment, because they don't know where to go.
Also, you remind us, Margaret, that there are millions of people in the categories that we're seeking to examine. So the motivation of a normal person with a normal family leading a normal life in I don't know, Idaho is not going to be the same as the motivation of the people whose names that we know, the billionaires, the richest people in the world, who've gone from literally banning him from their platform because his lies are obvious and dangerous, to signing up 110% for everything he stands for and everything he offers. Their motivation is probably easier to unpick. They are never going to have enough, and they will always want more. And that's Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg.
That is
and
true.
Jeff Bezos.
But for the poorer people, not the captains of industry, etc., it's more difficult to understand. And there I give you the solution. It's community, and that's exactly what populism does. It builds
makes you feel at home, makes you feel part of something, which of course we saw on January the 6th. I wonder whether, Emma suggests, it's not that people are lacking. They're angry and vengeful. And that makes them easily misdirected by demagogues and grifters. There's probably, again, we're not going to get one answer that fits all of the people. Elon Musk seems angry and vengeful, oddly. And the more you learn about his life, the easier it becomes to understand why he might be. Mark Zuckerberg doesn't immediately seem angry and vengeful, but possibly to be that driven, you need to be in possession of demons that most of us happily are not in possession. I don't know, but some amazing insights there from Margaret.
I want to really talk about the nature of truth now and lying.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of get carried away a little bit as to whether people believe what people believe and what they don't. And I think truth, over the past few years certainly, has become more subjective, in that we just, rather than believing what we believe, what we think is true and what we don't think is true, we tend to just believe what we like the sounds of.
Yes. Well, that's what alternative facts was designed to achieve, isn't it?
Quite, yeah.
And to give people permission to believe their own versions of things, even in direct contradiction of observable evidence. Absolutely.
And it's not just Trump, obviously, although he's Trump and his kind, and Elon and the rest of those have contributed to it as well. But we've seen it in this country, with Boris and Brexit and all these other things, is that people just choose what they want to believe rather than what they know to be true. And I know you were speaking a moment ago about there are sort of three categories of people, the people that do believe it. And again, I think there are people that do believe this stuff genuinely.
there are people that don't believe it, but they'll go along with it anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe because it
we missed them out, didn't we? I think that describes most of the Republican Party movement. They must be holding their noses, but they're bending their knee at the same time.
Well, they are, and that's because they're self-interested, and they go along with or support what they think will benefit them personally the most. And it might be their own
That's
career.
very easy to... Oddly, the higher profile you are, the easier you are to understand. There is personal advancement in it. There is personal enrichment. There is professional preferment. Or there is, he's going to make regulations. He's going to punish your commercial foes. He's going to punish your foreign governments who are insisting that you take down disgusting images from your social media platform or stop using it to incite riots or whatever it may be. It's possibly easier to see what people who've got a lot have to gain from throwing their lot in with a despot or a dictator. It's harder to see what ordinary people get, but it's just a watered down version of the same thing. Whether it's true or not, they believe they're going to get a payout.
Well, I think so, yeah, and I think as well when you look at what all the campaign things and the promises he's even broken them before he's even got into office.
But it doesn't matter,
the
does
cheaper
it?
Gas, the cheaper groceries, whatever it might be. And I think I hope I'm not being insulting to Americans particularly, but I think there is a certain element anyway, at least, that are quite inward-looking, really, and they're really, if somebody promises that, eggs are going to go down, or gas, or whatever it might be.
Well, nothing else really matters, and it does sound condescending, doesn't it?
It does, and of course that doesn't apply to all Americans by any means.
No, but it applies to enough. It applies to enough. You should care more about these things. I'm reminded of when The Guardian had a letter-writing campaign to write to Americans telling them not to re-elect George W. Bush. And even at the time, even as a soon-to-be fully paid-up member of the liberal elite, I thought that's not going to work. Imagine if you got a letter off someone in a foreign country telling you how to vote in your election. That's not going to work. That's why it's condescending. It can be true and condescending at the same time.
Yeah.
That's quite worrying, isn't it? The idea that you should care more about these things. Yeah, but I don't, pal. Buster,
well,
mate.
No, but and now we've not got people writing letters to us, but what we have got is people with social media platforms telling us how to think.
Yeah. And trying to interfere in UK politics, up to and including a Daily Mail columnist the other day calling for America to buy Britain, which is quite a turnaround from the days of Brexit. And Brexit possibly is Castle Donington in Leicestershire, not Derbyshire.
It's on the border.
Is it?
So depending on whereabouts you are, yeah.
So your switchboard must have come up as Derbyshire, because a couple of people are pointing out that they thought it was in Leicestershire. But there we go. We've cleared it up. It's on the border. I don't know. I mean, there it is. One man's condescension is another man's fact.